right, folks. Hello, and thank you for joining us. This is No Soundbites Allowed, and I am your host, Michael Voss, Dragon's Hutton Tier. I hope you excuse my little jest there. I wanted to give a good wish to my good friend Anthony Brindisi. Many people may not be familiar with him. Anthony Brindisi is he's the former member of Congress who had lost in 2020. He's now stated that he will no longer look for running for re-election. And so we wanted to take a moment to give him our fondest wishes. Anthony, that was for you. I hope you enjoyed it. So folks, let's talk about what is going on. It's Sunday, it's 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, which means we are doing a live stream with you, talking to you about what's going on in America, what's going on in the world, and most importantly, hearing what you have to say about this, listening to you on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, DLive, on all the social media that will allow us to reach out to you anywhere in the world and let you contact us. In fact, you can also call to the show at 607-242-1582 to let us know what you think about what's going on in this world. And I see that we should be live on YouTube. I think we're on at least one of the channels of Facebook, and we are being blocked by one of the channels of Facebook. It's part of the shadow banning. We go through this a lot. It's kind of sad. But folks, we're going to be talking about a lot of things today. So we're going to be talking about Arizona. We're going to be talking about election recalls. We're going to speak about what's going on with our generals in the United States and wokeness and the critical race theory. We're going to speak a little bit about Kamala Harris and what's going on in our southern border. We're going to talk about a lot of things, and I want to hear what you have to say. This is about speaking with you to hear your voice. It's one of the few spaces on the internet where you're allowed to do that, even when we are getting blocked by some parts of the internet. So obviously I mentioned Anthony Brindisi, and I wish him the very, very best. But let's start off with something a lot more serious. And you may recall this. Do you recall when it was back in May, just a little over a year ago, on May 30th, when MSNBC was telling us about the peaceful, the blissful riots that were going on throughout America? If you don't remember, this is from MSNBC itself.
I want to be clear in how I characterize this. This is mostly a protest. It is not, generally speaking, unruly.
Wait a minute. It's mostly a protest, which is why there's a building that is burning behind this MSNBC reporter. It is generally not disorganized, as a building is burning down right behind its reporter. Let's remember, folks, this is what we have been told for a year. We have redefined what is a riot, because a riot is defined by the people who are in it, by the color of their skin. Our nation, in the space of a year, while we were locked down and isolated in our homes, our nation became a racist nation. Not that it was before, but that it became such. We took a trip backwards in time to about the 1930s, and we flipped the races that we wanted to attack, because it was about whiteness is a bad thing. Being born white is intrinsically a problem. And we know this because that's what critical race theory is teaching our children. Whether you or I agree with that or not, doesn't matter. That's what we're telling our children in our schools. And we have all of this media that is prompting this, that is promoting this idea, this propaganda. And again, you don't have to believe me. This is MSNBC. That fire, that arson, is not considered a crime. And that's a problem. But it's not just ending there. Because as the theme of the show today, don't believe what you see with your own eyes. Don't believe what you hear with your own ears. Don't think, just obey. Obey critical race theory. Obey the neo nobles in our elected process. Listen to the Democrats, listen to the progressives, because they're experts, they're leaders. They're telling you what to think. They're telling you what to feel, and it doesn't matter what you actually feel. And it doesn't matter what the truth actually is. I'll give you an example of what I mean here. Did you notice that today, June 27th, Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii came out and said, Democrats do not stand for defunding the police. She said that. These are her words. She said that Democrats don't believe in that. And then I have to say to you, well, wait a minute. This is Cori Bush. Cori Bush is a congresswoman. And she is here, as you can see, on January 27th saying defunding the police isn't radical, it's real. She supports this. How about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? That having our legal system as it is right now is indefensible. And Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez leads the call to abolish police. That's what she said. This was on April 14th of 2021. And this is from The Independent, the UK. So what are we supposed to believe here? Our news media are showing us, they're telling us, and they've been doing this for a while. I'll give you another example. This is Bob Wessler. He is in the Southern Tier. He is a legislator. And yes, for full disclosure, I had run against him in 2020 and I lost. That's fine. But I'm pointing out Bob Wessler because, as was reported on June 26th of 2020, Bob Wessler supports defunding the police. Bob Wessler is a progressive Democrat. So whether it's at the local level, whether it's at the federal level, we're seeing this constantly. It's all over the news. Democrats are very much, and just to make it clear, MSNBC, this reporter and the staff at MSNBC, they're not conservatives. They're not Republicans. These are Democrats who are speaking. These are democratic ideals that they are pushing. But you're being told at the same exact time, well, no, that's perfectly fine. It's not a problem. There's no problem here. Mazie Hirono, we're not trying to defund the police. We wouldn't do that. Even though we are passing policies to do that, even though we are we're sending out money to make sure that this happens, even as members of Congress, elected officials are actively saying this, don't believe it. Because, your eyes are lying to you. Your ears are lying to you as you watch this happen. As you go to various schools around the nation and you hear our school boards, our local elected school boards say over and over then, we have to have critical race theory because being white is being evil, because we have to protect minorities by subjugating others. And please understand, at the core of critical race theory, I recently had an argument. And I want to hear your thoughts on this, folks. I want to hear what you have to say. But I'm in the middle of a debate with a college professor right now. And this college professor, who is helping to define doctrine for colleges in the Southern Tier of New York and part of the greater part of New York State, and they are trying to introduce critical race theory. And they believe in critical race theory because they want to protect people. And that's kind of scary. They want to protect people. And I want you to understand, critical race theory, and Dal, I'm going to get to your comment in 1 second. Critical race theory at its core has one absolute tenet. White people are superior to other people, which is why they have white privilege. And everyone else is lesser. They are less than. They are inferior because they don't have power. They're not white. This is an undeniable tenet of critical race theory. And that is a problem because it is racism in its ultimate form. It is as racist as you can get. And yeah, I get excited about this because I don't particularly like racism. I don't care if someone's saying it's in your favor, it's for your benefit. I don't like racism. I don't believe in racism. I wasn't raised to be racist, but our society is teaching kids now. Dow mentions that they really rely on people having extremely short attention spans and memory loss. Well, that's why this program has the ability, we go back in time, we do long form political commentary to remind you, how did we get to this point? Not only what is going on and what are the consequences of what's happening, but how did we get here? And we got here in part because when they had everyone locked in their homes, you were trapped. They could do anything they wanted, and they did. And what they wanted is to tell you that if you happen to be white, you're evil, that you are intrinsically, subconsciously a racist with way too much power, and that other people, based on the color of their skin or their gender or their sexual preference, those people need to have what you have. You should be stripped of what you have. And I tell you right now, we disagree. It is absolutely wrong. And the people who are promoting this the most are the people who benefit the most. They are those who would use race as a means to gain power and control over the public. And when you say, and this is really interesting, when you look at critical race theory, and I've been presented this by many educators, many college professors, and they love to point out, well, here's all of our documentation from other people who think exactly the same way that we do. And by the way, critical race theory is defined that if you disagree with it, well, you must be a racist. There's no opposition to this. And I guarantee you, in the Southern tier, in our colleges, you're going to see in September new programming, new documentation that's going to come out, and it's going to say institutional racism is a reality. And if you disagree with it, that's because you're a racist, because it has a circular logic. And that logic says, don't believe your life experiences. Don't believe what you see. Don't believe the people who are arguing against this. No, believe what the people who are being promoted by internet overlords, who are being promoted by the major news media, who are being promoted by a sliver of the Democratic Party, the progressives and socialists, believe them because they have power, and you have to do what they say. I think that's terrifying. And folks, you can tell me if you think I'm right. You can tell me you think I'm wrong. If you think this is wrong, this is a conversation, because we are seeing this infect other nations as well. The very same educators, the very same professors in colleges that I am speaking with, who are teaching other children these ideas, they're also telling me, well, you have to understand, all of the other academics think this is true. And I had to ask them, well, what happens when you get outside of that academic circle? What are parents saying? What are the students themselves saying? What are other countries and states? What are they saying? And they don't have any idea, because they're wrapped in this bubble of academia. And when they look at their preferred channels of news media, like CNBC, CNN, MSNBC, they only get told the same thing that they want to hear, because they're the same people who are on these programs. But you know what? Everyone in the world doesn't necessarily agree with that. You know what? Let's look at France. This is French news. And they reported back in May, quote, you start by giving your hat, then you give your coat, then your shirt, then your skin, and finally your soul. You know where that quote comes from? Charles de Gaulle, who I think many on the left would have a problem trying to attack Charles de Gaulle, a hero of World War II, a great leader of France. And France is looking at critical race theory and these ideas that are being imported from America, and they are rejecting them wholesale. Anti-racist and post-colonial activists, like their comrades in America, frequently take to the streets and violently attempt to take down statues and other symbols of, quote, oppression. This is a problem because they are using force. This isn't about a debate of ideas. This isn't evidenced by science. We've been told for a while now. We knew this was coming. Do you remember the 60 Minutes interview with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez? As she said that science, that facts, being exact and correct, isn't as important as feelings. That's what she said on 60 Minutes. Please double check me, fact check me if you would like. you'll see she said that feelings are more important than the truth. And when that is the motivation of democratic socialists and the progressives, well, that allows them to do things like call you a racist and to persecute you and to punish you for having a thought that says, well, no, I don't agree with that. That's racist. Because you're the bad guys. Dow mentions, was ruminating on this concept. If a body has to seek continual external validation for a belief, that speaks volumes about how tenuous their own belief in this concept is. And I have to say, I agree. This is tenuous. You know, it's not just me who says this. It's not just you who are saying that. You think it's just isolated people? Let's think about this. This is from June 18th, 2021. This is a man talking at his local PTA. I want you to hear what he has to say here.
When you talk about critical race theory, which is pretty much going to be teaching kids how to hate each other, how to dislike each other, that's pretty much what it's going to, that's pretty much, I don't care what you say, it's pretty much what it's going to all come down to. You're going to deliberately teach kids, this white kid right here got it better than you because he white? You're going to personally tell a white kid, oh, the black people are all down and suppressed. How do I have 2 medical degrees if I'm sitting here oppressed? How did I get, first of all, time up, because I only got 5 minutes now, 5 minutes. 2 medical degrees, no mom, no dad in the house, worked my way through college, sat there and hustled my butt off to get through college. You gonna tell me somebody that looked like all y'all white folks kept me from doing that? Are you serious? What's sickening about this whole thing is what y'all doing right now is already something I do in my community right now to speak out against stuff, because black folks are getting told by other black folks, oh, you know you ain't gonna be able to do nothing out there in the world because them white folks ain't gonna let you get no, or you know you're not gonna be able to do it here because you know the white man gonna keep you down. Well, how did I get where I am right now if some white man kept me down? How am I now directing over folks that look just like you guys in this room right now? How? What kept me down? What oppressed me?
And I want you, you know, and I'm just taking a small part of this, but I want you to think about that. Yeah, we're so oppressed. We are absolutely oppressed. That's why LeBron James makes how many millions of dollars and owns how many homes? Because Oprah is a billionaire. Obama got elected twice. So we're absolutely oppressed. And we know this because people like Don Lemon are on TV, because people like Morgan Freeman star in movies, because we have how many doctors, lawyers, carpenters, professionals, college professors, how many? And yet we're oppressed. We are repressed. We can't do anything. We can't succeed without some white progressive liberal taking care of the minorities, without them saying, well, we have to protect you. We have to take care of you because government has to take care of you. Really? I don't think so. Look in your local community. I guarantee you, you will see successful Black, Hispanic, Asian individuals. You will see unsuccessful white individuals. You will see people of every spectrum that succeed and fail in life. And that's because they've made a choice. It's not because of critical race theory. It's because they made a choice, and there are consequences to that choice. Just like this man I just showed you from Illinois. It wasn't because he was being oppressed. It's not because they gave him a medical degree just because of the color of his skin, which is what critical race theory leads to, that you aren't able to achieve anything. It's only going to be given to you. You know, when I look at the leaders in the communities, whether I'm local or national, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, I think, would be very upset if you said that she was given her congressional seat because of the color of her skin and the gender she has. She would be upset. She would tell you that she went to college, that she's educated, which is in dispute. But yet she's telling everyone else of color, you can't do what I just did, that you're not good enough, that you don't have that capability. This is insane kind of logic. Now, again, if you think I'm wrong from anywhere in the world, please tell me why. Please explain to me how I misunderstand that. Because I will point to empirical evidence of how I think I am absolutely correct, how we should understand this correctly, and why we should speak up, and why we should ask questions, and why we shouldn't just blindly obey. let me explain. I know that America isn't critical race theory, that we aren't inherently racist, because there are, at this very second, at least 2 million people waiting in line to legally enter this nation. That at this second, there are no less than 11 million, if not as many as 20 some odd million illegal aliens in this nation. People who have left their country to come to this country because this country is better, that their opportunities are better, that even as criminals who are actively evading prosecution by law, that they are better off hiding in the shadows in this nation than anywhere else because they have more freedom and more opportunity for themselves and their children. And there is no other place on the face of the earth that is as good as this. More people are trying to get into America than any other country in the world, and there are fewer Americans trying to leave America, even if they say critical race theory is the thing. Let me get to some of the comments. Dow mentions that people have, he mentions critical race theory is an example of applied reverse psychology. They say critical race theory is to break down systemic racism when it establishes systemic racism. Critical race theory is Marxist classist warfare using a race label. Mike Bowie, hello Mike, it's good to see you. Mike says, they push racism to distract us. They don't want us to see what they're really doing. And I think that's very true. Because if you look at Mazie Hirono, Senator Mazie Hirono, as I just mentioned to you and showed you, this is the one who's telling you there is no one, Democrats aren't trying to get rid of the police. They're not trying to defund the police. Even as we hear Maxine Waters, Cori Bush, where we hear Democrats directly say that they want to defund the police at the local, federal, at state and federal levels. She's actually literally telling you to your face, as I showed you, and I'll show you again. She's literally saying to your face, you are stupid. She's saying Democrats do not stand for defunding the police, lying to your face. As we have seen and as we have reported on this program, we know that the Democratic city councils in Atlanta, in Minneapolis, in Seattle, in Portland, they've actually come out and said that they want to defund the police. And in every single one of those instances, in every single city where we have seen them defund the police, we have seen an exponential or near exponential rise in violent crime and murder. Every single one. There is not one exception to that. And I do ask, if someone disagrees with me about critical race theory, if you disagree with me about defunding the police, any of the progressives and socialists out there, not Democrats, the progressives and socialists who are pushing this idea, please show me the evidence of any city, any town, anywhere in America where they have defunded the police and there has not been an equivalent and instantaneous same time increase in violent crime and murder. Please show me the evidence, because no one has it. Now, no news media has it. And I guarantee you, if it existed, NBC, MSNBC, CNN, the news media would be jumping all over this. New York Times would be screaming about this at the top of their lungs. It doesn't exist. Back to the comments. Anne, hello Anne, it's good to see you. Anne says, this is an example of classic Marxist tactics to break down the fabric of society. I agree with you. Dow mentions the end game for critical race theory is a Maoist style cultural revolution. For those who don't know, Mao is the harbinger of communism into China. Will you teach me? Hello, it's good to see you. They need to stop teaching racism and start teaching respect. And I think that's a big difference, because we used to have that. And when I hear people say, well, we need critical race theory because it's the only way to protect our communities. It's the only way to end crime. You know what? I want to give you an alternative here. This is the alternative. June 25th, yesterday, 2 days ago, at 7:57 p.m. This is my local community. You know what this is in front of you? This is a church meeting. This is an outreach of mostly black individuals, because it's a mostly black church, that they're here in their community, they're cooking food and inviting people to sit down in the seats and to just listen to how they can improve the community by being a community. It was open to anyone and everyone. It was out in the air, and this is an effective way to fix the community. Because defunding the police will not make that better. We know that. It is an evident. We've seen that for, what is it, half a year, a little bit more, 9 months. We've seen critical race theory. We've seen defunding the police fail. You know what we haven't seen fail? Going to your local community and actually speaking with your neighbors about how to make your neighborhood better, to have a conversation with your neighbors, to be involved in your community rather than running around in the middle of the night with a big old protest of people imported from other cities to come into your city to have a riot and a protest, running around in the middle of the night, waking people up to say how unfair everything is, give us your power. Which is exactly what we see with every single protest of BLM, every single protest of Black Lives Matters, Antifa, Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow. Look at every single one of their events in your local community. Besides across the nation, look at your local community. And everywhere that you saw one of those protests and or riots that came out of it, let me ask you, did they say, and this is how we're going to improve our community? They said, get rid of the police. The criminals were all happy about that. But how did they actually improve anything? How did they improve your neighborhood? Did they turn around and when they raised money, did you see them open up a food bank? Did you see them set up tutors for kids to teach them how to do math and learn science? Did you see them try and set up civic patrols to cut down crime? Did you hear them denounce drugs and drug use and opioids and say how they're going to try and help people to get off of those things? Have you seen that happen even once? Because I can tell you nationally, the BLM movement, they didn't do that. But Patrisse Cullors, one of the creators, who is a self-avowed Marxist, she did go out and buy 5 houses for herself. She did that. She didn't try and stop opioids or drug use. She didn't try and stop sex abuse of illegal immigrants. She didn't try and do any of that. She's not worried about the people of color that she's supposedly trying to help. She bought herself 5 houses. That tells you something. So let me go back to some of the comments here. Dow mentions that the issue with the lack of respect stems from the social engineering through our school systems to rely on government and media experts and authorities instead of teaching critical thinking skills. Will agrees. Well, let me ask you, because I agree with that. I think it's absolutely true. And we're seeing this in our school systems again. These are conversations I'm actively having with members of colleges who are going to be instructing how to teach students. I am having these conversations with individuals on school boards and teachers in schools who are being told that they must teach critical race theory. They have to teach you how racist math is. That is a thing. And yes, even in the local school systems, you go to your local community school, you go to something like SUNY Broome, I guarantee you that this September, they are going to introduce racism, or what they call critical race theory, into your schools, into math classes. And they're going to teach your kids in college, from kindergarten all the way through. And like this father was mentioning, what's going to happen when you go down and it's 10 years down the line? Matter of fact, I want you to hear a little bit more of what that man had to say, because I think it's very important. Because he goes on to say,
I work for myself from off the streets to where I am right now. You gonna sit here and tell me this lie of critical race theory? This the reason why black folks can't get ahead because of white folks? Are you kidding me? This is what we come to now. I can't believe we even talking about this right now. The last thing I'm gonna say right here is something that's crazy. Martin Luther King said he wanted his kids to grow up in a world where they are judged by the contents of their what? Their character, not their skin. If they letting this stuff go on right now, it is absolutely doing the complete reverse of what he's doing. So when February comes, don't talk about Martin Luther King. When February comes, don't talk about Black History Month. If y'all gonna sit there and just pretty much pee on his grave with this nonsense, that's exactly what's about to happen. When it all comes down to it,
So,
the person is gonna be.
and that's the truth. Don't talk about Black History Month, Hispanic History Month. Don't talk to me about anything, because you're not advocating for any of that. What you're advocating for is exactly what Martin Luther King, what Gandhi, what Mother Teresa, what they've never agreed with. You're talking about creating racism. You're talking about subjugating people because of the color of skin. And in doing that, you are propping up one group of people versus another. And I've had this conversation with educators, and they don't seem to understand this. They're like, Mike, you just don't understand. You're right, I don't understand. Because what you're saying in critical race theory is white privilege, therefore white people intrinsically, subconsciously are racist and have power, and therefore everyone else is lesser. And they don't seem to understand that. And they want to say, well, no, this is perfectly fine. Well, Martin Luther King never agreed with that. And we all tend to agree Martin Luther King was a great man, and that he was seeking equality, that he was raising people up. And their answer is, well, that's nice, but he was wrong. Because that's what they're telling us. Critical race theory is telling us he's wrong. That Martin Luther King, that Gandhi, they're wrong. That we need to have this racism, this oppression, and it's oppression not just by someone's color of skin, it's also based on their gender, because men are inherently more oppressive than women. And that we have to have, and it's based on your gender, your sexual preference, because, you know, if you are heterosexual, well, then you're oppressive against everyone else. And they're trying to tell you, and you have to change. You have to change, which is a form of oppression. You have to change because they don't like what you are. And they don't like what you disagree with them. They don't like you disagreeing. And so you're wrong, and you have to change. Does that not sound like a problem? Like there is something inherently and at the core absolutely wrong with this? And that they're telling you, but don't think about it. Don't ask any questions. Just do what we say. They're telling you to obey. Don't think, don't question. I mean, you can't ask questions about elections. You can't ask questions about critical race theory. You can't ask questions about where our government's going, about socialism. You can't ask these questions. You have to obey. You just have to let it be. You have to change and accept it. Dow mentions it's all history. No one gets a month. History is all year long. Michael Bowie mentions, I'm sorry, but how is math racist? Mike, this is the idea, and I'm glad you asked that, Mike. The concept from whether it's called identity, gender politics, whether it's called intersectionality, whether it's called critical race theory, they are all the same thing. And they all have the same conclusions. And the answer is math is racist because math does not acknowledge that Arabs created the math system, that our math system is based on Arabic numbers. And that we should acknowledge and we should be paying attention to and we should be promoting the abacus. Now, what does that have to do with getting a man on the moon? What does that have to do with putting satellites in the air? What has that got to do with the exploration of science? Nothing. Does it change 2 + 2 = 4? No. But their answer is that's not the important thing. It doesn't matter if you have the right answer. It's the matter that you think the right way. And don't misunderstand me. This is what they are saying to us. How often do you see? Well, it's not about getting to the right answer. It's about getting through the right thought process. That you have to make sure you have to think. That's what the new math is about. That's why they switched to the new math. So that you could show, how did you think about this? How did you get to this new mathematical system? And it doesn't matter if you get the right answer. You get points for thinking the right way. And every parent who has a kid who is looking at math today, tell me that I am wrong, that the teachers are not grading on how you thought about the question. not the answer itself. If there is a parent who has a child that can tell me I am wrong, I want to hear that. Because I've spoken to the teachers, and that's what they're teaching. How are you thinking, not the answer you get. So math isn't about math. It's about thought. It's about following the rules. It's about obeying. Doesn't matter what your conclusion is, because like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez already told us, like we've heard from the squad already, it's not about the truth. It's about the way you think. And actually, you shouldn't think. You shouldn't be thinking. You should just be doing what you are told. That's how math is racist, and that's insane. And Will mentions that Black history is American history, and that's true. Black history in America is American history. Does that mean it's all dandelions and rainbows and sunshine? No. American history isn't always good. Then again, I can point to any other nation in the world, any other historical group of people in the world, and not every moment of their existence has been positive. There is good and there is bad. People learn, they improve, they become better, societies grow. But that doesn't mean that we have to demonize it and say, well, that doesn't exist anymore. And we have to continuously punish people for the past without taking into account that we've improved our present and our future. I mean, I love it when I hear these kids, and I hate to say this, okay? So I'm 53, okay? So please excuse me if I call you 21 and I sometimes call you a kid. But I think the reason, the thinking, I'm talking really about the thinking, because this is childish thinking. And I hear people tell me, well, we're more oppressed today. Black people are oppressed right now. And I can't understand that, because in 53 years of my life, that's not true. Because in the 1970s, when we had the change, the civil rights movement took place, and yeah, in the 70s, I remember when people were trying to beat me up because I was in an elementary school with white kids, and when they said hello to me and I had a conversation with my classmates, their older brothers were upset because of the color of my skin. That's racism. Today, how many mixed couples do you see? How many kids are in school together? We see how many videos, music videos, movies, entertainers. What do you see all over the place? That couldn't exist in the 70s. My family literally took in a husband and wife that had to escape because they were a mixed couple. And they came to New York City because they weren't safe in other parts of the country in the 1970s as a mixed couple. Today, no one even blinks an eye. No one cares. What is it, Ben Affleck and J-Lo? Aren't they a couple? Does anyone care? No. Why? Color of skin? Doesn't matter. But yet, we're being told, today's oppressive. We had a president in the 1970s. If you asked anyone in America, if you asked anyone in the world, could there be a black president? They'd tell you, not in our lifetime. That's not going to happen. Maybe 100 years from now. In the 1980s, when we saw that Reverend Jackson, Jesse Jackson, ran on the Rainbow Coalition, did anyone think he was going to win? No one. No one in the universe thought that. But we thought it was a nice idea, and it was an impressive thing to see how we had gone in the space of 10 years. In one decade, we went from no one, a black man couldn't even run for president, to the fact that we got to a point where they were able to actually run. And if you think I'm wrong, remember, go back to the early Eddie Murphy, his comedy shows. Go back to the Delirious comedy show, where he's laughing about how someone running for president, the black man would be under a scope. People would be trying to kill him left and right. It wasn't possible. And today, it is already our past. It is already a reality. But you're not supposed to think about that. You're not supposed to think that things have improved. I'm not saying things can't get better, but you're not supposed to think about how these things can improve. You're not supposed to ask a question about why are we punishing people for the color of their skin, because that is inherently racist. You're not supposed to ask these questions. You're supposed to obey. And that's really terrifying because it's not just happening in our schools. In fact, it's happening in our military. You may recall this. This is from General Mark Milley. And General Mark Milley recently said, when Michael Waltz, a Republican, a representative, member of Congress from Florida, and a former Green Beret, he asked Milley this question. He says, this came to me from, there is a question about critical race theory being taught to officers in the United States military. And Michael Waltz says, this came to me from cadets, from families, from soldiers with their alarm and their concern at how divisive this type of teaching is that is rooted in Marxism that classifies people along class lines, an entire race of people as oppressor and oppressed. The general responded with, I've read Mao Zedong. I've read Karl Marx. I've read Lenin. That doesn't make me a communist. So what is wrong with understanding, having some situational understanding about the country for which we are here to defend? You know how many insane problems are with that statement? Because I want you to really think about this. Let me explain. First of all, the United States military their purpose is not to be the police in the United States. They're not here to try and supervise civilians. That's not their job. Their job is to protect America from foreign enemies. Yes, and domestic too. That's part of the oath. But their primary purpose is to take care of America from foreign invaders and foreign influences. That's their first primary purpose. So why do you understand and learn about communism? Because communism is a diametrically opposed point of view. It is, by its definition, the definition of communism, as per Marx, is a worldwide system. It is something that is opposed to independent governments, to independent individual people. So you need to understand that to understand your enemy. Let's go back to Sun Tzu. Know your enemy. Otherwise, you will lose every battle. It's classic military theory. So yes, you should understand what's going on with communism because they are an enemy. They are opposed to our government. Now, let me ask you something. How does knowing about critical race theory help? What part of critical race theory helps you? To say that white people are just by birth are intrinsically and subconsciously racist. How does that improve America? How does that benefit anyone? How does that move this nation forward? Because I don't see it. You want to say, well, this is going to, because we have to worry about insurrection. We have to worry about insurrection. You mean like when we saw what? Our cities being taken over? We're talking about autonomous zones. I talked about this a lot. Autonomous zones are, by definition, insurrectionists. They violate every law that exists. Every law that exists. They're doing so on the basis of race, which makes it also racist. So you want to be upset, or rather you want to forgive autonomous zones and every law they violate and the arson and the murders that are committed because of them. But you want to be very upset because a bunch of people went down to Washington, D.C. without a plan, and they protested without destroying, they didn't burn down the Capitol. They went there, they were disorganized, they broke a couple of windows, and that is more dangerous than the fact that Minneapolis has been devastated for decades to come. Portland is devastated for decades to come. That we have cities like Austin, like Boulder, Colorado, New York City, where they have destroyed communities for decades with billions upon billions of dollars of damage, both to people and to businesses. And people have been killed. and that's not your preference, that's not your primary focus. You want to tell me, if I want to hear a general saying, I need to know what's going on in our country, then please explain to me, tell me that you're studying up on why autonomous zones exist and why do we allow them to exist? Because that's the greater threat to the United States. The greatest threat to the United States are when people take hostage other American citizens and they destroy those American citizens' homes and businesses and kill some of those American citizens for the mere fact that they don't agree with them. David Dorn was killed because he didn't agree with the looting and the rioting and the autonomous zones. Jessica Dottie Whitaker in Indianapolis was killed because she didn't agree with the rioting and the racism of BLM. We have children, 8-year-olds were killed in Atlanta because someone wanted to have an autonomous zone in Atlanta. That is a fact. But you're not supposed to ask a question. You're not supposed to think. You're supposed to just obey. Which is what we see this general doing. Much like many of our teachers are doing. They're just obeying. They're doing what they're told. They're told, this is critical race theory and you are going to believe it or else. So, Will You Teach Me says exactly, those who don't know their history are doomed to repeat it. Mike Bowie has mentioned, did you see the pictures on January 6 protesters with green and orange neon tape on their helmets? None were arrested. Will You Teach Me says, makes it scary when top government officials do nothing about it but fan the flames. And I agree. Now, mind you, this is available. I know it's on at least one of the channels of YouTube, Facebook, and the other one is being blocked at this moment. I know it's on DLive, it's on Twitter, it's on YouTube. If you disagree with me, tell me why. Because this is a discussion. As you can see with Mike, with Dal, with Ann, you're all happy to talk and tell me, Mike, you're wrong. You just don't get it. You're missing the racism, the implicit racism, the inherent racism that's causing all of this. Because I really don't see it. I see the racism that's causing the future problems. And in a decade, we're going to see this. This is going to get a lot worse. Because we have completely abandoned Martin Luther King. We have completely abandoned Gandhi. We are teaching our kids how to hate. And that isn't a positive for society. Not at all. But it doesn't end there. Because like I said, we have other issues to talk about. There are other things that are going on. But I do want you to know there is hope. Because Ted Cruz has put in a bill, and there are several other bills that are out right now that are looking to stop this ideology, this insanity. One of the bills is by Representative Burgess Owens in the House of Representatives. And that bill is House Resolution 397. So you can look it up for yourself. Links for everything that we're showing you and describing will be in the description at the end of the video. But you can look this up for yourself. And in there, he points out two important things. Whereas on January 19th, 2021, the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights posted a webinar to provide an overview on how racially exclusive practices, that would be critical race theory, are prohibited under Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Critical race theory is actually opposed by the law, by civil rights law. But the Department of Education has since archived the webinar and labeled it as, quote, not for reliance. So the Department of Education has been told by the Office for Civil Rights that critical race theory, gender identity politics, and intersectionality violate Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And the answer is, under the Biden administration, hide that from the public. Don't let the public know that this is a violation of civil rights law. Because we need to promote this. The Biden administration doesn't want you to know that. And Representative Burgess goes on to say, whereas on January 22nd of 2021, the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights reportedly suspended a finding that an Illinois school district violated Title VI of the Civil Rights Act when it segregated students and staff, directed teachers to treat students differently based on their race, and endorsed racially charged messages. Think about that. Have you heard that being said before? You know, talking about treating by segregating staff and students. You know where you've heard that before? I can tell you, but do you know? Safe spaces, which we've been seeing for the last 4 or 5 years now. Safe spaces where we have to segregate people based on the color of their skin, where we have separate graduations for people of color versus people who are white. That's a crime. That's violating the Civil Rights Act. How about directing teachers to treat students differently based on on their race? Where we have teachers going around, like in my local community, where we had teachers who are teaching 8-year-olds over Zoom calls about how they should hate whites. That's racism. Also a violation. And you're seeing this, and it's in our colleges, and they're teaching these kids this. And it's okay. It's only okay because, well, it's good for the progressives and the socialists because they're going to promise to give you free stuff. You're going to get free stuff. If you happen to be a minority, you're going to get free stuff. If you're gay, if you're trans, if you're a woman, you're going to get free stuff because we're going to protect you because you are so inferior, so lesser that you cannot do these things for yourself, that these progressives are going to go out and they're going to take from someone and give to you because you can't do it for yourself. They are essentially telling you that you are a 2-year-old baby, that you are an infant, that you have the inability as an adult to take care of yourself. So they must do it for you. And they will use the full power of the government to do that. And if you disagree, stop thinking. If you have a question, stop asking questions and just obey. How could you not be upset by that? Which is why I'm not surprised that I'm not seeing whether or not this is still being shown on Facebook, on Twitter. I know it's on YouTube, but I can't see anyone else because they don't want you to hear this. They don't want you to have this conversation. They absolutely do not want you to have this conversation. Will You Teach Me tells me you've probably heard it before, but they still try. They are trying. But we have to ask questions, and we need to have open discussion. We need to work on our First Amendment rights. And we have to be the beacon for the rest of the world. When I speak to people, and I know people watch this show in England and Germany and Peru, Canada, Mexico, India, China, and they're looking at this and they're saying, what is this expression? I know if they're saying things like that, back in the 80s, 90s, when I was in Russia in 91, I know that the Russians had this idea, well, a black person couldn't be in Russia and be American because they had this idea that, well, black people must be criminals. It's because of the way the media is being propagated out there. They want you to feel like you're lesser if you're a person of color. We have to be the examples, not just based on our color, but because we're Americans and saying, we want you to be able to speak. We want to hear what you have to say, and we don't have to agree with you. We aren't monolithic. We have brains, and we treat each other with enough respect to say that you as a grown adult American have a right to have a choice. You can think what you want to think, even if I don't agree with it. But somehow, that's no longer the answer. And it doesn't just affect critical race theory. It's not just our education system. It is in everything that we are seeing right now. And I want to get to that. Because this yesterday, June 25th, 2 days ago, I had an interview with Gail Golick and Susan Wood. And we were talking to them about the audit, the Arizona election audit, which has now gone, the state legislature has now gone into recession. They stopped. And that means we have 90 days